My guest this week is an author and creator of the legendary Dilbert comic strip, Scott Adams. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to talk to you, but before we get into anything, you've also received the Reuben Award, which is for outstanding cartoonist. They spell it the other way, though.
Coincidentally, yes. Although it's not as prestigious as you might think, because they changed the rules some years ago that you couldn't win it more than once. And there aren't that many cartoonists in the world. So if you stay alive long enough, you got a good shot at a Rubin Award.
Then you're pretty much going to win one. But you won it, what, back, that's over 15 years ago or something, right? You won it.
Which is amazing because I'm so young.
So there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm very excited to talk to you, and we're gonna definitely do the politics stuff and the Trump stuff and all that. But first, for the people that probably know Dilbert but don't know much about you personally, you have a sort of interesting backstory of what kind of led you to becoming a cartoonist and everything. You used to be a regular working man. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I worked in two big companies. I worked in a big bank in a cubicle, and then I went to the phone company and worked in another cubicle. And both of my careers ended the same way. I keep forgetting I can say anything I want on here.
You can say absolutely anything.
For
you
years,
want.
there are things that I've sort of censored or played down in my backstory. But
yeah, let's break you out of self-censorship right now.
I'll put it right out there.
Yeah.
My banking career ended when my boss called me in her office and told me in direct language, as directly as I'm going to tell you, that she couldn't promote me anytime in the future because I'm a white male.
Wow.
And she said it wasn't discrimination per se in the normal sense. It was that the local newspaper had discovered that there was no diversity in senior management. And in order to reverse that, since the pipeline wasn't as good as it should have been either, they pretty much just had to stop promoting people who look like me.
Wow. So
I said, well, how long is that going to last? And she said something like, well, it took 200 years to get here. So it might take a while to reverse this.
Yeah.
I made up that part, but that was implied.
Yeah.
So I put my resume together and I left. Went to Pacific Bell, started working there, got on the fast track. I was identified as an up-and-comer who was ready for management. And one day my boss called me into his office. And he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but the word has come down. I can't promote white males.
Wow.
And it was the same reason. It was the newspaper had discovered that they, too, had a problem with diversity as senior management. So that was the point that, as I like to say, when you hear the story, you say to yourself, wow, that must have been a really bad day for you. But it turns out that the moment you realize that your efforts and your outcomes are not related, it really frees up your schedule. Yeah. So suddenly I had time for hobbies. I wasn't coming in so early. I wasn't working so late. I started looking for other things to do.
Yeah.
Things that I could control my own fate a little bit. So one of the things I tried to do, and it's one of many things I've tried to do both before and after Dilbert, was to get a comic strip published. I didn't know how to do that. And how do you do that? Like, what's the process for getting a comic strip started? This was pre-internet.
Right.
You couldn't find out anything.
Pre-internet. Yeah. Hard to believe that such a time existed. Yeah.
It was the time. But this is a true story. This is sort of the amazing luck part that everybody has in their story at some point. Any successful person, if you look at their story, it's like, I worked hard. This really frickin' lucky thing happened, and then something good happened.
Yeah.
So in my context, there were lots of things that didn't work out for me, but I got real lucky this time. And I came home, I was thinking to myself, how do I become a cartoonist? And I was flipping through the channels on TV, and there was a TV show on how to become a cartoonist.
Wow.
But I'd missed like 28 minutes of the half hour.
Right.
And I just figured out, well, that's what that must have been about. And I wrote down the name of the host from the closing credits. And I wrote him a regular snail mail letter. And I said, how do you become a cartoonist? And he answered, 2-page letter, said, buy this book, use these materials. And he said, whatever happens, don't get discouraged, because it's a real tough industry, and you'll get rejected a lot, but don't give up. So I said, oh, this is great. I bought the book, I got the materials, I put together some comics that were just single panel comics. Sent them off to the major magazines, they were rejected. I just thought, well, I tried. right? It's the best you can do is try. So I put all my materials in a closet, and I forgot about it. A year goes by, and one day I walk out to the post office, or to the mailbox, and there's a letter there from that same cartoonist who had sent me the original advice. His name is Jack Cassidy. And if he's watching this, hi, Jack. And he said that he was cleaning his office, and he came across my letter that was in the bottom of a pile. And he said that he was just writing to make sure that I hadn't given up.
Wow.
And that was the only reason he wrote. And I had given up. And so I thought, well, maybe he knows something that I don't know. Maybe he sees something that even the magazines didn't see in my work. So I decided to raise my sights to try to become a syndicated cartoonist in newspapers all over the world, as opposed to just trying to get a comic in a magazine. Because I figured if I got rejected at that, it would feel like progress, because I'd be getting rejected at a higher level.
Sure.
That would feel good. I sent out my samples, and United Media, one of the big syndicates, called and offered me a contract.
Yeah, I mean, that's really just a great story of not just perseverance, but also that someone else that you didn't even know really dragged you back in when you were out. And also that your work before that, you hit that dead end of, you're not going any further here. It happened to be because of your skin. It's interesting, the way you describe it, you don't sound like you sound like you sort of understood what they were doing, even though it was against, it wasn't working for you.
Yeah, I have two minds of that, all right? There's my social mind, which says, yes, there was no diversity in two major companies. That's not a long-term sustainable situation in this kind of a country. So it had to be fixed. And if you let it get fixed in its natural course of events, it would take too long.
Yeah.
It just would be, untenable. And it is also true that when someone who looks like me, a white male in 1979, gets fired from a job without doing a bad job, or in this case, sort of encouraged to quit, I guess, I had lots of opportunities. So it wasn't the worst thing in the world for me, and it worked out well, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have two minds about it. I think it was good for society, bad for me at that moment, but it worked out good for me in the long run.
Yeah. What do you think in 2016 if the same thing happened to sort of a middle management white guy and they were told that now? Do you think the reaction from the average person would be the same? Do you think a normal corporate atmosphere, do you think they would say it in such sort of
I think everything changes with the times, right? So the tool you need, you have to adjust it for the time. If it's years ago and you've got slavery, you need a civil war, all right? You got to go for the biggest, bluntest weapon you can. If it's the 70s and you still don't have good representation in top jobs, you need something less blunt than a civil war, but far more blunt than doing nothing and just hoping for things to change.
Yeah.
So I was in favor of a sort of a punch in the nose, sort of to try to get things kick-started. But now I think things have improved, all right? Nothing's fixed. We haven't ended racism. We haven't ended sexism, right? But there are pockets in which it really isn't a problem.
Yeah.
There are pockets where it's probably a huge problem, but you can choose your pocket now. So if you're somewhere where there's a huge problem, we do mostly have mobility. You can quit that job. You can find a place where you do have an advantage, I saw a picture today that's running around Twitter of the Huffington Post editorial board.
Yeah.
And it's 100% white women.
Oh, yeah,
right?
I've seen that before.
So if you're working for a company, you're a writer, you're a white woman, you got discriminated against, there is some place you can go where probably something like the opposite is going to happen. Right. So I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that in the world of 2016, you can leave where you are. You have mobility of sorts. Nobody has perfect mobility, but you can move.
Right.
So you can control your own fate in a way that you couldn't in 1979.
Right, and it's funny because if we're talking about the same Huffington Post picture, it's a long table, all of women, and the woman who took the picture is saying, look at our diversity here. She means diversity in that there's a lot of women or something to that effect. Yeah. And she's actually showing you it's different than just all white men, but it's not really diversity per se.
There was an amazing bit of blindness that someone could tweet that publicly and be proud of it. Now, I think we're all happy that women have, all the opportunities. I've literally never met anybody who thought differently about that topic.
So you believe women are equal before the commenters start going on and on, oh, he hates women or something?
Well, I believe in equal opportunity. I think every individual is different, but of course you have to have equal, access, equal opportunity.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump forward. So now you get the cartoon out there and it starts taking off. How much of it was rattling around, all the ideas of Dilbert, which is very much takes place obviously in the time of your life that you were working in the corporate atmosphere, how much of those ideas were rattling around in you while you were doing it? I mean, was that just your creative outlet to not go crazy in a corporate job?
Well, it turns out that Dilbert was sort of the sum of all my frustrations from my corporate world. And it gave me an outlet for them. I hadn't been thinking in terms of, gosh, I got to make a comic about that until I actually started working on it.
Yeah.
But it was a handy outlet. And by personality, I'm excited by problems. I'm excited by chaos. Can I swear?
You can swear away. I told you, no rules. I wasn't kidding.
If things go to shit, suddenly I feel good. Because there's always opportunity, right?
Right.
If things are broken, at the very least, there's a job for somebody who fixes broken stuff, right? So every time something's broken, I think, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah.
So I just love that situation.
That's probably a good segue to the Trump stuff, but I want to do some other stuff before we quite get there. So I was doing a little research on you. You're into hypnotism.
Well, I am a hypnotist.
You are a hypnotist.
I'm a trained, certified hypnotist.
Yeah. How did that come to be?
Well, the backstory in that is that my mother gave birth to my younger sister while my mother was on hypnosis, while she was hypnotized. My family doctor was a hypnotist. And we hope he was a medical doctor, but I know he was at least a hypnotist.
Right. Well, you all came out, right?
Yeah, we all came out.
Yeah.
And my mother reports that she felt no pain, did not have any drugs during childbirth, and was awake the whole time. Now, this is an unusual situation. So even a well-hypnotized person, 20% at tops could feel that kind of extreme phenomena. But the other 80% can be deeply influenced. And so when I heard that story, I was pretty young when I heard it. I thought, what is the superpower, and how can I get that? It was part of my process of trying to accumulate skills that would layer well on whatever I was naturally good at. And I thought, wow, knowing how the human mind works, knowing how to influence it, knowing how to hypnotize people, has got to work everywhere, right? Where would that not be a good idea?
Right. So do you practice it some? I mean, do people come to you does someone say, I have a smoking problem, or, I eat too much or something? You say, well, let me hypnotize you and get you out of this? How do you use it, actually? So
I've since broadened what I call hypnosis to include anything in the field of persuasion, influence. It could be advertising, in the dating realm, it's game theory or whatever it's called. So there are a million forms of it, but it's all about how to influence people in the irrational sense. Right. So you could be using some of the basics of hypnotism right now, but you're not putting. So people think of hypnotism like I'm waiting for you to pull out the watch, right, and put me to sleep. But you're saying there's sort of skills and lessons you learn in that you can apply, that you probably put into Dilbert, and that you certainly are using on Twitter and things like that. So when I was learning hypnosis, of course, I was doing putting people in so-called hypnosis trances, and doing things like having them remember their past lives, which, by the way, is not real. The past life thing's not real? Not real. Really? Because I know a couple of people reading that Journey of Souls. Do you know that Journey of Souls? I don't, but it's all about the past life regression and that whole thing. Yeah. I can tell you, I as practice, I would run a little ad in a local rag to say, come in for $20, I will hypnotize you and show you your past lives. And person after person came in, and sure enough, under hypnosis, they could remember their past lives. But and at the time, I thought I was actually open-minded about it. I was like, well, maybe. I mean, how do you rule it out? Yeah. But after you do a few, you realize that none of them have lives that you haven't seen on television. like nobody said, yeah, I was an Ethiopian, something that you wouldn't know how their life was. Right. Everybody was an Egyptian princess, or a Viking, right, or a cowboy, You know,
Yeah.
I think the most exotic one was a French surf. You know, I'm thinking, nobody's. Oh, and here's the other thing: I had person after person come in, and not one of them was Chinese in a prior life.
That's
now do the
interesting.
math. Do the math, right?
Right, math alone.
There's a lot of there's a lot of Chinese people.
Yeah.
Somebody was Chinese in a prior life, if there were such things as prior lives.
Right. So what do you think that tells you about the human psyche or the human condition, that people, you'd put them under hypnosis, which you believe is a good practice, and that ultimately so you would say that that's then their subconscious, that's just exercising itself? It's just, it's combining with their ego to like just make up a story.
It's not just their subconscious, it's the fact that the hypnotist has implanted the suggestion that they can retrieve their past memory, and so that's enough that they imagine that they are having actual memories.
Yeah.
The main thing you learn to practice hypnosis, to be a hypnotist, is you have to understand that people are irrational all the time about everything. And if you don't understand that, you can't even do it, because none of it would make sense for a rational person. People aren't, if you think people are affected by data and facts and good arguments, you can't even do hypnosis. The whole thing just falls apart.
Yeah. Wait, you don't think everyone, though, is like that, right? You think
100% of the world are rational pretty much all the time. The times when you're not are trivial. So, if you're balancing your checkbook or trying to decide which object is heavier and how much you need to lift it, that's probably a rational decision. But those are trivial in terms of our lives. It's not going to affect the house you decide to live in, the job you take, the person you marry. It's not going to affect the way you dress most of the time. It certainly won't affect your political choices.
Right. So you would say those choices are done in an irrational manner for most people? Buying a house, I mean, people spend a lot of time trying to figure out what house to buy or what career to go into. You think those are done through irrational choices?
We make our decisions about people and things in the first few seconds, and then everything after that is a rationalization. I'll give you perfect examples from my life. A few prior relationships ago, we were looking for a house, looked at a bunch of them, we both didn't like them. We drove up to the house we ended up buying, sat in the car without even going inside the house, looked at each other and laughed, because that was our house.
Because that was it.
Yeah. And I don't know why. I mean, just had a look, had a feel, but without even seeing the inside of the house, without knowing what we would pay or anything like that, we had decided, and sure enough, we bought that house.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Did it work out?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
In another relationship, we were looking for a car, with my ex-wife. Looked at car after car. We pulled into one dealer, stood there, looked at the car, and I just laughed. I didn't know anything about the car. Didn't know the specs, didn't know the mileage, didn't know anything. I just knew that was going to be our car, sure enough.
Yeah. So for the people that go to a gajillion houses and inspect every inch, or that go to 27 car dealerships and all that, that's it's sort of, you would describe that's just sort of a different way of doing things. You're sort of going to find a feeling that's going to appear, right? That's
no, I'm saying that everybody's doing that, but I'm aware of it.
But you're aware of it.
Right. Certainly there are some things that would eliminate a car from your potential. If you're looking for a truck, you're not going to buy a Prius.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a little bit of common sense in there. But when you get down to those final choices, that's all just how it feels.